let's keep rolling into the next question.
Get it.
As we that's been kind of the fun of this whole thing, right? We talked about before we got on here about the changes in the podcast from year one, right? But everybody we've had on, their journeys changed so much since 2020, and talk to us when you guys took the D1 job and some of the lessons that you learned coaching at the Division I level.
You want me to take that one first, Siege?
Yeah, go ahead.
I mean, you've been to Omaha twice, so like
Omaha.
Hot Rock, get to the other side. Hot Rock. No, again, I think for me, like the biggest thing, like CJ hit it on the head with the Pro Bowl thing. Like it was, gosh dang it.
Oh, put that a little closer to the camera there, CJ.
Oh God,
Can't quite see it enough.
I was wearing this the whole time, right?
Yeah, that's right.
It was just so small earlier. Now it's so big.
Yeah, I was backed up a little bit.
I love the camera off, camera on, like just the ultimate epitome of like.
There's just a Wi-Fi issue. I don't know what that is. We fixed it though.
Kelly, I think your camera's skipping. I think it's your camera again. No, I think
you guys knew this was going to go exactly this way, right?
We hope, yeah.
Like there's plenty of edits that are going to happen here. No, I think
you can lead a camel to water, but continue.
Well, as a former camel, I think for us, like the thing that I realized moving from Division II to Division I was, again, like the biggest thing was just the information that you can get. And, for me, like I talked to CJ a lot, and it was like, man, like we got True Media, which is a data information center. And like CJ and I talked about that a lot during the season last year of like, man, like that's some information that we've never had access to when we were at Division II, whether that be at Biola, Point Loma, UC San Diego, but then having access to that here at Campbell, it was like, man, like that's some really high quality information that can help develop your players and help prepare your players to have success. And I think for us, like, Coach Justin Hare, who I worked for here as a head coach, I joke that he's 10 years my older, man. Like if you had him on the podcast, he's going to talk like me. He's going to act like me. He's going to be the same personality, but 10 years older. And working with him, the biggest thing was like understanding, hey, like how do we get our players in a position to have success? That's all that matters, because to him, all that matters is Omaha. There's nothing else that matters, and that's all that matters to me. So when we go through our day-to-day preparation, game management, like all that stuff, it's like, hey, how do we win today? Because if we win today, that gets us one step closer to Omaha. And it doesn't matter who we're playing, it doesn't matter what we're doing, it doesn't matter what inter-squad we're having, what practice we're having, what details we're having. Like, everything matters. And I took this from Eric Newman a long time ago, like 1% better mentality. And that moving here, his best friend in coaching is now the head coach at Abilene Christian. And he previously worked at Dallas Baptist. And, just again, like all these, baseball's so small. Eric Newman's lead assistant at Dallas Baptist was Dan Hefner. And Dan Hefner talks about at Dallas Baptist 1% better. Well, the head coach at Abilene Christian, Rick McCarty, was the pitching coach at Dallas Baptist. So, like, they talk about it, Coach Hare and him, and I come here, and it's the exact same thing, man. Like, it's like, hey, how do we get these guys 1% better every day? And how do we get this mantra, and how do we get these guys better? And what are we doing every day to help these guys get to Omaha? And that might be, making sure their stuff fits. That might be making sure the indoor's ready to go. Maybe it's having practice ready. Like, whatever that is, like, that's all that mattered, is how do we get these guys to get 1% better? And, it was a lot of fun. Like, I worked with a great staff, and, like, our staff has rotated out a little bit from last year. And, like, Tyler Robinson, who's now the pitching coach at Liberty, and then Joey Holcomb, who's now the hitting coach at South Carolina. Those two guys, for me, like, being on the road with them, I learned a ton on recruiting. I learned a ton about developing players. And then they left, and then I did a lot of recruiting this summer and, like, learning, like, what they wanted and, like, understanding what Coach Hare wants. And, like, coming from that side of the table is how I explain, like, hey, Coach Hare, like, I've been on your side of the table. what do you need from me as an assistant coach? Because I know what the stressors are you're getting on the head coach side of the table. How can I help you as an assistant? And that was something that for me, like, really prepared me for this job. And, we had a great year. Like, we didn't obviously get the big ring that CJ has, but we made a regional final. We got, now I don't work in the NCAA anymore. I could say this. We got hosed out of not hosting a regional. Only team in the top 15 RPI that didn't get a host. Like, it is what it is. But, I think for us, like, the nobody's from nowhere thing is a real thing here, and our guys love it. They love the challenge. They love going against everybody. They love getting everybody's best. And, I started playing into that working here. And even this year, like, they opened with Santa Barbara, and I came in November when the top 100 prospects list came out, and I was like, guys, we're playing the top 50 has a pitcher from Santa Barbara in it. We're not going to win Friday night. Like, how are we going to do this? Like, let's go, let's roll, let's go get them, let's go. And it's like this us against the world mentality of nobody's from nowhere. And I give that 100% to Coach Hare because he's an Ohio guy, and CJ knows this as well as anybody. It's Ohio versus the world, man. And if you're in that world, like, it's just different, man. I think, like, learning the office side of things and the professionalism side of things of, like, donors and fundraising and all the challenges that come into play in Division I is just, it was a lot different than I thought it was going to be in regards to coming from Division II. Like, if we lost, like, my phone wasn't blowing up. If we lost in Division I, some donors are calling like, hey, what's going on? Like, why'd you lose a Longwood on a Saturday? Like, hey, we had guys hurt. We were playing some other guys. Like, we lost one of our 5 conference games. Our bad. But CJ, Stanford, World Series team. Tell us about it.
Yeah, so I can actually tell you one of the lessons I learned really quickly applied to when I had gone back and visited Biola and some of those players, and when I had talked to some of the high school kids back again from my hometown. I think it's good information for high school level players or college level players. I would get asked, what's the difference? Like, we had Brock Jones my first year, who is, borderline famous player, right? And he's got hundreds of thousands of followers on social media and all these things. And I would easily tell guys, like, hey, when that moment when coach says, all right, let's break it down, practice is over, you guys go home, you pack your stuff up and you're done for the day. Yeah, that moment right there is where a lot of the guys who are at our level, at the Stanford level, that's where their work begins, right? It means it's an obsessive quest for perfection for a lot of these guys, where you're like, this is borderline unhealthy, but you give into it because you see how much it means to them, right? I remember, and I know he wouldn't have a problem with me telling this. I remember this year was a year where Carter Graham was supposed to be a lockdown easy player of the year for the Pac-12 for us, right? He crushed baseballs last year. The game was just easy for him. Had 20 plus home runs, and it was just, he's a great pure hitter, and he was hitting under 200 for the first month and a half, 2 months of the season. And I remember getting back from a road trip, and it's late at night, as it usually is. Stanford's policy has always been like, hey, we're going to catch the last flight out from anywhere we go, just in case there's extra innings. And so we get back from a road trip. It's 11:30 at night. I pack up my stuff, and I'm walking out of the coach's office, and I see one tunnel lit up in the cages. I'm like, all right, I'm going to go find out. Like, I was kind of the relationship guy. I was like, I'm going to go find out what's going on, who this is. And it's Carter. And he's our 3-hitter. He's the anchor of our team, the leader of our team. And he's out there in sweats in a tank top. And he's just like, bro, I just got to figure this out on my own. I was like, all right, I respect it. You got to figure it out on your own. But like, what do you got to figure out on your own? And then kind of, talk to him for a little bit. And it's those moments where you realize that the separator for these guys is that whether or not they're the most talented player at this level, it just means so much more to them. And the things that they have done outside of the regular 2:30 to 5 o'clock practice in high school were the things that got them to where they were here, and were the things that got them ready to go when their name was called. And then, there's countless stories, right? We have Owen Cobb, a Seattle kid on our team last year, who was a absolute freak athlete, right? We have this catapult system that tells us that Owen's top speed is 22 miles per hour. That's absurd, right? He's a freak athlete, could do anything. Doesn't play for his first 3.5 years at Stanford. He comes out of Seattle. He's one of the best hitters in at Garfield. He plays in a great high school conference. He's hitting 400 almost every year. Doesn't play because he's got some just like in-game Y words, right? Like we've all got those guys that they're great in practice, get in the game, not ready to go. Well, our starting shortstop goes out for a couple weeks. Owen's got to go in and play for the first time in 3.5 years, and the difference in where I have been before and at Stanford was that Owen practiced every single day, ready to go in case his name was called. There was no reps taken off. The seriousness and the attention to detail in which he approached the game was, and it sounds cliche because we've all been there, right? We've either been told that information or we've told our kids that information, like, hey, one has to practice the exact same as 27, 35, 40, whatever you have on your roster, right? One has to practice the exact same as those guys. And Owen goes in, and what does he do? He's honorable mention all Pac-12. He's got some of the biggest moments in our season. He plays a lockdown shortstop for most of all the year. And then you've got Alberto Rios for us last year, the same thing, right? Like he was a bullpen catcher his first year. There's nothing. I can't imagine a kid from the high school that he came from with the pedigree that he had as one of the best players on the West Coast coming into a school like Stanford and then being told, hey, you're going to be a bullpen catcher because you just don't have the ability to crack the lineup for us. And what did he do? He's like, all right, cool. I'll catch anybody, anytime. You let me know. I'll be there. I'll be that guy. And there was never a doubt for 2 years that Alberto every single day was going to support his teammates, be that guy, work extra. He's got, the Notes app that we barely open on our phones. He's got video integrated in there of major league players' swings. I didn't even know you could do that till I met him. He's got video, and he's got all these notes, and he's got all these things on there, and his attention to detail for years is just so good. And the players this year came to his defense and were like, hey, you got to put him in there. And he was the third string option in left field for us. There was 2 other guys that had to fail before he got an opportunity in Fullerton. He got a big double for us, and then he just never stopped hitting. And so you talk about like getting to this level and what it means. There is just a sick work ethic and attention to detail and pride that, and when you're successful, I think that's the kind of difference, right? Is our last guy on the bench wants to get to Omaha as bad as the first guy in the lineup, right? And they want to do it, and the value of truly accepting your role and understanding what your role is unbelievable. And so I think that was the biggest difference I saw, was just the work ethic and the attention to detail and the readiness. Like Timo Becerra comes in for us, a sophomore who hasn't played at all. And he comes in to fill in for Owen, who got hurt at Washington State. And he's got Knox in Omaha as a sophomore, and he's got no playing time. And he's up there as if he's just been doing it every single day, right? There's 30,000 people there, and, however many watching on TV. And Timo's just up there, just like takes a pitch from Rhett Lauder and looks at the dugout and smiles. And we're like, this kid's just got the it factor, because he's been prepping for this day every single day as if he was supposed to be right where he is right now. And I think that's just the biggest difference maker. And it's one of those things, all of us in this exact chat, right? We could all look at it and be like, man, somebody told me that exact same thing. And I either laughed at them and I was butthurt that Kelly was able to play third base better than I was, or I was butthurt. We've all had those things, or we've told that till our face is blue to the one kid that you're like, man, if you just worked this hard, you will be able to reach whatever it is that you want to reach. But you think that this 9-to-5 version of baseball is the thing that's going to get you where you want to go. And it's just not it.
CJ, I want to jump in. Like, I think of like what you're saying with all your guys that like made the impact this year. like with Rios and with like Timu, it's that Saban line from that's like come out, like, because obviously Saban retired, and now like all these like one-liners from him are coming out. It's like, how much did he play as a freshman? Like, no NFL team has ever asked him that. Right? And like no scout has ever walked up to me and be like, hey man, like, how much does this guy play as a freshman? Like, no scouts have ever asked that. But it's such a like, you know, in the day and age of portal where it's like I didn't play as a freshman, like I gotta bounce. It's like, well, why? Like, do you know how much value there is in you playing? Like, not like, if you're in a really good program, you're not playing as a freshman that much. But there's this idea that's like, well, like, my dad needs to sit at the water cooler in his office and tell everybody, like, well, my son plays as a freshman. Like, let me tell you about my son. And it's like, no, it's not a big deal. Like, no scout cares about that. Like, the scout cares about, like, what you're doing now. And, like, the Friday guy at Campbell this year is, like, he was 2-5 as a freshman in junior college. Like, 2-5. He flipped the script and went, like, I think it was, like, 7-2 or something this year, or last year in junior college, and was, like, 90-92. Came this summer, trained, prepared for this year. Like, now he's a top 100 prospect. And it's like, no one cares. Like, nobody is like, as a scout, as a professional, is like sitting there going like, you know, like, this is going to make or break us. Like, he didn't play as a freshman. And it's like, that's the whole point, is like, what are you doing now? Like, what you've put in over the years gotten to the point that you're a draft eligible guy and ready to make an impact in our organization. Mm-hmm. Not like what you did as a freshman when we couldn't draft you. And that's something that, like, for me, I kept hearing Saban talk about that. Like, for some reason, it kept popping up on my, like, social media stuff. I was like, man, like, that's so accurate. Like, because think about it, like, I mean, you know, see, just like, even like when we were at Biola, it's like, hey, like, Robert Anthony Cruz, like, gets a free agent deal. Like, that dude got cut as a D1 and then got picked up as a guy after the, like, he got picked up in the draft. Like, and he didn't play as a freshman as D1. And so that's where, for me, it's like, it's such a, like, the transfer portal right now, like, in recruiting is like, just because you don't play as a freshman doesn't mean you're not going to get picked as a junior or as a senior. Like, it's just such a, it's again, like, you talk about goals, Jason, it's like like, what are you doing, like, in your long-term goal, and what are you doing in your short-term to get to your long-term? And that's just something, like, it's terrible, because, again, like, I go back to, like, Urban Meyer, which is a terrible reference because of some of the stuff he did in professional football, but it's like, if your goals don't match what you're doing as a work ethic standpoint, like, it ain't gonna happen. It don't matter. But yeah, I didn't realize that about Timu. Like, I didn't realize that. So
no, that's good, Jeff, because I mean, you think about that. You know, I mean, we talked to Lenny Ayers here a few weeks ago, and we talked about that transition of 6 months of an athlete, and you guys even say it on the college level. You know, I mean, a lot can change, you know, and it seems like in the society today, how many of you guys watch commercials anymore? I don't, you know, Tebow, right? I mean, you fast forward it all, right? And if you have to watch the commercial, dude, you got a jacked up TV system. You need to get it. I mean, nobody watches a commercial. I mean, that's just
What's the
life.
TiVo,
I mean,
Jason?
You know,
East Coast
I mean,
guy.
just
East Coast guy. Like, I'm trying to watch that as fast as I can. Like, I'm not trying to stay up any later than I can. All right. Like,
yeah, right. You just got to fast forward to the end, right? So we have this expectation. And it's like, you're right, Jeff. I mean, part of it's the parents, right? Because they want to be at the water, you know, tower there, drink, you know, talking about how their kid is starting, you know, for whatever team it is. But the thing is that there's just, you're preparing for that moment. And it's not that it gets easier. It's that they get adjusted to that moment. It's so that they're ready for that time when you're at Omaha or you're in that super regional game. that you can go out and get it done. So that's just well said. I just feel like the game itself, like we have to get back to that, right? I mean, it's not that we're losing that ground, but if we continue to let these transfer portals and all this other stuff nonsense go on, I feel like we're losing the realness of the game of baseball and just the authenticity, of the game. So,
well, I used to tell CJ, like, when we were recruiting, it was like, and I give CJ a ton of credit for this too, because like he was our recruiting coordinator. He handled a bunch of the guys we recruited, and I was like, man, like in the 2 years of a real draft, I'll call it a real draft because it's more than 5 rounds. We had 4 guys signed in 2 years when we were at Biola. And we would recruit kids and be like, hey, man, listen, like, it's not about, like, you can't get drafted as a freshman. Like, you can't get drafted as a sophomore unless you're 21, which you're not. So, like, it doesn't matter what you do your first 2 years here. It matters what you do your third and your fourth if you want to be a professional athlete. And so, like, what are we doing on a day-to-day basis to get you to that point? And, again, like, I saw some tweet that came out that was, like, from Baseball Reference in regards to, like, professional players from Division II schools, and Biola has 5. And it's like they were number 8 or 9 in Division II. Because now it's really hard as a non-Division I player to get drafted or get to professional baseball. And it's like, hey, like, it wasn't like we were just sitting on our thumbs, like, trying to figure out, like, hey, how are we going to get this better? Like, 2 position players, 2 pitchers. It was 2 and 2. It wasn't like, hey, it was like one or the other. It was like, hey, like, we just kept getting you guys better, and that was the job. And, like, hey, how do we get better? How do we get good players? How do we get them better? And it's like, again, like I said off, like, either earlier, it was like, hey, like, we had a guy throw a no-hitter in A-ball. We had a guy who's throwing 100 miles an hour left-handed with the Red Sox. Like, and CJ, as a recruiting guy at the time, like, did a great job of evaluating players. And it was like, hey, man, like, there was a guy that we recruited and 3 guys that we had on the roster that got better when we were there. That was like, hey, like, what are we pushing these guys to do every day outside of the 9 to 5, like CJ said? Like, hey, like, it's really easy to be really good during practice. But what are we doing outside of it? And how are we getting better outside of it? And, like, it's easy to make fun of Tyler Baca. Like, and CJ knows Tyler Baca. Like, but Box was in there every day at the end of the day banging the machine. Like, he was out there hitting the machine and dragging somebody with him to feed the machine. Because you had to feed it because we were D2. We didn't have, like, an auto feeder or anything. Like, somebody had to feed it. And so someone would go with them. And that guy kept getting better and kept getting better and kept getting better because he was feeding that guy. And it's just, again, like, it's so easy to get caught in the narrow-mindedness of, like, what am I doing right now to be the best? And then, like, oh, I'm not having the success I want right now. But what is the 1% again every day? 1% every day, 1% every day. Like, how do I keep compounding those? And, like, that's where, I think about with CJ is like, man, like, I used to tell guys all the time as a head coach, I was like, hey, like, if you're not starting today, like, your infield outfield is your game. Like, how do we make this your game? And so, like, with the catchers we had at Campbell, I was like, hey, man, like, we don't do in and out. Like, that was just our thing. Like, we didn't do in and out. But we had time, like, 10 to 15 minutes every day on game day. You were on the mini hack, like, training. Is your training preparing you to be the best player you can be when you get your number called? And, like, that was the mindset. That was the job. And that's where, again, I think when you're talking about hitters, like, there's 15 to 20 hitters. When you're talking about your position group as a defensive coach, like, there's 4 as an infield coach, maybe 6 to 8 if the infield guy. But, like, you got to get those guys better every day still. Like, it doesn't matter, like, that you're not starting that day. But, like, if it's your turn, like, you can't screw up. Because if you screw up, like, the team loses. And when guys understand that, like, your team gets better. And again, like, I learned a long time ago, like if we lose, it's my fault as a head coach. If we win, it's everybody else's success. Like I'm just there to handle the team. And, you know, that's where like I used to give, like, I would go meet with my AD after a weekend we have success. And it was like, yeah, you know, like CJ and Ben Cordy and Ryan Crow, our first year, like, man, those guys prepared the guys. Like, they did a good job. We went 4-0 this weekend. Like, don't know what you want me to tell you. Like, they got those guys ready to go, and they were in the right positions, and I just let them go and let them play. And everybody's different, but again, like I think like I learned a long time ago, like when you win, it's the assistant coaches and the players, and when you lose, it's 100% you. And that's just like a ownership thing that like I learned from extreme ownership. Like success is everybody else's success. When you win, it's theirs, and when you lose, like you wear it so that it's not anybody else. Like nobody else needs to get ricocheted because you're like, you know, like we pitched really well, but we didn't hit. And it's like now I'm firing it on somebody else, and I'm passing the blame on somebody else. Even though at the end of the day, like it's your program, and like Kelly knows as a head coach, like it's yours. Like every bit of it is yours, and that's a hard thing. And of course, like when CJ left, like you know, head coach complaints here. It's like as soon as CJ left, like we had a drinking incident on campus, like, and I was like, hey, like I thought I set the bar pretty high of like what is right and wrong, and as the head coach, like he won't play this weekend. He won't play opening weekend. He's a pitcher, like he's our starting rotation guy. Like he won't pitch. He won't play. He won't travel. And that probably cost us a game. But it was again like setting the tone. They're like, hey, like this isn't acceptable. And like we got better from it. But again, like in the short term it was hard, but as a head coach, when you finally get in that chair, it's your call. And like you got to think, and I was going to say this earlier, like when you finally get the opportunity, like Jason, you were asking, like when the carts are hooked to your horse, like it's a lot of pressure, and like you got to understand, like, hey man, you're trying to make these guys successful for their future, and that's not something you take lightly. Like it's something I didn't take lightly, at least. And I don't know about other head coaches, but like I know for our head coaches, like man, like Coach Hayer, like we're for him. I was like, man, like all these guys have moved on to either like higher paying or higher like name brand jobs, and that's his tree. And those trees, like the branches break off of that, and it's like understand like you're responsible for other people and their families and their lives, and it's a scary thing. Like everybody wants to be a head coach until they get it, and it's like, okay, like now it's my show. Like what do I do? So.
No, I think Jeff, you say a lot about the Glory Days piece kind of rung with me tonight. Talking about that, and I think in our shoes at any level as a coach, like you have to be able to define success in a lot of different ways, especially in the college level, if not even the high school level. You know, I think you go to the high school level, like some of these kids, you know, especially at the smaller school that, you know, Eric and Jason are at to an extent, is, you know, this might be the best thing that they have going on right now in their life. And for us, like there might be a kid that is going to be a great academic, a great engineer, a great whatever, a great husband, father. In professional baseball isn't the most important that we got 20 rounds now. Like, let's be real. Like the odds are stacked against the college baseball player to, you know, be able to move on to the professional ranks at the MLB level, minor league level. That's really hard. So you really have to have all of these perspectives that you use on a daily basis to define success for players. And, you know, the academic side is obviously huge. The, you know, the community service side of things, the being a good person, the life skills, all those little things that go into it are so important. at really any level of our game. But I love that. I love that perspective that you kind of made there, and that's gonna ring true for me pretty well, because it's really easy to get caught up in the wins and losses on things, but at the end of the day, like, this is a small blip in their lives, right? Like, this is preparing them for their 40 years after college, right? To be workers, humans, husbands, fathers, all those type of things. So it's super important that we keep that perspective on a daily basis and take a step back and say we're playing a game. CJ going in the tunnel with the kid that's ready to pull his hair out at midnight, after a trip. Like, to put things in perspective is huge. And I get that as you go up levels, there is more pressure, right? It's about the money. Like, it really is about the money. The coaches getting paid, the players getting drafted, and that is the driver for a lot of different things. So there's some obvious added pressures, right, of wanting to keep your job because of the wins and losses, and the players wanting to post stats because of the draft and because of the signing and all of that. But have you guys, I guess, at your time in Campbell and Stanford, have you been able to have that conversation with any guys that are maybe that draft caliber, are that guy that has all the stress and the pressure because of the dollar sign that he might be putting aside because of his performance? Has that ever happened for you guys?
Yeah, it's a very tough conversation to have, because you have to remind that person, at least in my shoes, your perspective and outlook is so vastly different than anything I've ever dealt with. And I think letting that player understand that before you kind of like talk to them is really important, because I was never gonna be a top 10 round pick, and I don't know the stresses or the pressures that come with that. And on top of all of that, I don't know what it's like to be social media famous at their age, right? Like, these kids have people DMing them after big games, like, "Hey, you lost me money," or whatever. "This is an embarrassment." I mean, when we lost to Texas, the first time through, it was a bare knuckle boxing match, and our guys had their hands tied behind their backs, right? And they have to be very professional about it at a younger age. And there's an influx of fans just messaging them, and they're all accessible, right? All these guys, you can look them up; they're accessible. And not only are they thinking about, man, this could be the last weekend in the super regionals or the regionals that I ever play with my best friends, but on top of that, if I don't perform here, this is the last look that the scouts get to have. And I've been famous in the baseball community since I was 10 years old. And then so that conversation is I've had that conversation who's with a player now in affiliated ball. And he texted me and was like, "Hey, can we talk in the cages? Can we do a quick hitting session?" And I was like, "Sure." So I walked out there, and there was no hitting involved at all. He just needed to vent and to talk and to be like, "Dude, I think I'm going to quit baseball. I can't do this anymore. It's affecting how I interact with my family, and that's the last straw." Right? Like, it was all the pressure and everything of this player. It was affecting how he was interacting with the most loved people in his life. And so I asked him, I was like, "When's the last time you just did something for yourself?" Right? Like, you're really into whatever, fashion, music, this and that. Like, you're into your own things. So when was the last time that you identified as something outside of a baseball player? And we kind of had like this discussion, and he was like, "Man, I haven't done anything for myself in forever." And so I was like, "Hey, the next off day we get, just be off. Just be off. Don't be around here. I'm going to stay here. And if I see you, I'm going to fight you." Like that kind of thing, right? Like, it's just be you as you exist in the real world outside of this bubble that we've got with ourselves, right? Because as coaches, we're pretty much going to exist in that bubble all the time. But as student athletes and as athletes in general, you need to have some type of healthy separation and identity outside of it, because it can all end so fast, right? And so I think that conversation piece, even whether it's a guy at Stanford or Campbell or whatever, potential first round pick, or a high school player who has been tabbed as the next big D1 prospect who may not be living up to the hype their freshman year of playing, like that reality piece is so important for them to hold, where, hey man, like, you exist outside of this. And I think that you might be, identifying a little too closely to this. If the weight of all of this is just holding so tightly on you that it's affecting yourself outside of this, then we gotta figure out something else, because it's not, at the end of the day, that serious.
Yeah. So first thing for me, based off CJ's comments and also Kelly's comments, is like, you got to remember, like, me and CJ are small school guys, Kelly. So like, don't blast Eric and Jason for that. Okay, like we're the pride of 1A, 2A baseball.
Go South Whidbey Falcons.
Cedar Park Christian, baby. Like,
There you go.
Like, go Eagles. Like, I got my jersey somewhere in the closet behind me. Like, I think, like, as a former head coach, like, CJ is the GOAT of player interaction. Like, and that was something that I didn't realize, like, knowing him as a person when we started coaching together, like, different times, different places, and then working together. He's one of the best at it, and he's going to hate that I'm hyping him up. He's going to turn his screen off, like, all these things. And like, I think that like I joke, like, I have on my, like, slideshow machine in my house of, like, different events and different pictures and things like that. Like, CJ has some moments on there where, like, there's pictures of him sitting on a wall with players and just talking about life and just having conversations about life. And again, I think he hit it on the head. It's like, if your identity is based on your success as a player, you're doomed for failure in this business. And you're doomed for failure in this industry, in this life. Because again, like, 3 for 10 is really good. Like, really good. And if you are caught up in, oh man, I'm hitting 275, like, I suck. It's like 275 in professional sports where we work now, it's like, you're doing a good job. Like, hey, like, let's continue on this, like, let's continue up this mountain. And I think that's where I'm excited. Like, as a friend and as a person, I'm excited to see CJ in his role with the Twins, working with 18, 22-year-olds, and working with the guys from the complex, and working with guys from the Dominican, and working from guys that have worked their way up to the point where they get to low A, and see their success. Like, I think that's where, like, I'm excited to see, like, where he goes with the players, and, like, vice versa. Like, that's where I joke, because I'm the oldest guy on our staff. Like, I'm the oldest guy on our staff at 33. So, like, they were wearing me out of our meetings, like, Pops, what's up? I'm like, no, like, that's enough. That's enough. Yeah. That's enough. Like, hey, like this. I'm like, kid, I'm not that old. Like, calm down. Like, but I think that's where it's like, hey, like, I can relate to these guys because, like, I've spent 10 years with 18 and 22, 23-year-old guys and developing them as people and as players, and understanding that, like, getting an email from an AD saying, like, hey, like, this guy crushed his internship at 23 years old with a job. And CJ knows him, like Andrew Bove. Like, Andrew Bove didn't get the Pro Bowl, but he crushed an internship with Bank of America and is now, like, in the business of, like, life, and is engaged and is crushing life. And, like, he was our first guy we committed when we got to Biola. And, like, that's awesome. Like, again, like, that's the glory years you're talking about. Like, hey, man, there's some wins he has. Like, there's a moment as a head coach. Like, my first mound visit as a head coach is with Andrew Bove. Like, I love a guy to death. Like, I love his family, love him, have supported his sister, who's a college softball player. Like, I love those guys. Like, I'm here for them. And that's where for players, like, they remember that more than they do the X's and O's. They remember how you treat them as people. And there's guys, small school guy here, like, I think there's guys that I played with that are small school guys that I played with that are like the shortstop from my high school team, 1A guy. Like C-Dub and I are boys. Like, we're still friends. And he didn't play college baseball. He should have, but he didn't. And he got into the military, did his military thing, got married, has kids. Like, he's crushing it. Like, but like, he always, like, he'll still remember the impact I made on his life as a person versus like me as a coach. You know what I mean? Like, that is like, he texts me still like, hey man, like, you did this as a player. Like, I appreciate that. And now I respect you as a human being. And that's a really heavy thing to carry with you. And that's something that, you know, I'm really fortunate to have. Like, something that is a weight I can carry, and Kelly doesn't want to listen to it. And, you know, like,
See you, Kel.
4A guy. I get
He's
it.
out.
Yeah, those Woodenville guys, you know.
Yeah, trust me, as a guy who grew up in Malpe, I'm well aware of those Woodinville guys. Those higher, like, fancier guys, like, bunch of losers. Like,
Right?
if you were really tough, you'd be at Monroe or Snohomish, but you went to Woodinville, so it's fine. So it's like,
Right.
whatever.
Oh,
Yeah, get your cat.
Gotta get his kitty cat.
Dr. Evil.
Yeah, I was going to ask what guys I could say to that. I think sometimes coaches miss that mark, right? I mean, CJ, you're spot on, man. And you got that guy that kind of, in a sense, he doesn't wrongly direct you, you know, but he didn't know how to say it. Yet he was seeking help, right? And you took that in that moment to kind of like, hey, let's not talk about ball. Let's talk about you. And, you know, especially for Eric and I dealing with the high school kids, we deal with a lot of kids that have, man, baseball is their only out. I mean, this is like their own time to kind of do their thing. And Eric and I have talked about different guys we've had come into our program, and it's just like hearing, you know, moms and dads are going through a divorce, and, you know, 1 week they're at dad's and 1 week they're at mom's, and just the horror stories of how they come to the games and all they do is like their mom's over here and dad's over there. And of course, it's just additional stress for that player to be out there, and all they want to do is have fun. They just want to play. They just want to be themselves. But, you know, I think that as coaches, you know, taking those times to engage with our players, you know, and just to kind of seek them out and see those signs. You know, we always talk about, you know, seeing those signs in the classroom and be more aware of what, you know, different things of conversations or things we see on social media. But you know what? A lot of that can be shown on the field too. You know, sometimes it's just time out. Hey, we're not, you know, maybe for 10 minutes, we're not going to talk about baseball. We're going to talk about you, you know, and just taking those time moments and just kind of let them be who they are. It's important.
Well, as
Jason,
we
I'm gonna jump in. I'm gonna jump in real quick. I mean,
Yeah, go ahead.
like when CJ and I worked together. If I will, like, you know, I was dating this gal, and she had a nephew who was playing like 6-year-old baseball, and she was like, "Hey, can you come to his game?" And I was like, "Yeah, whatever. Like, I'll come to his game. He's by the house. Like, no big deal." So we go to his game, and we're watching the game, and the coach is going bananas, and like, just like absolute bananas. It is player pitch, like, whatever. Game ends, like, I go like stand kind of by like where the coach is talking, because I'm like, whatever, like, I'm the head coach of Biola, like, whatever. And the coach is blowing these 6-year-olds up about, like, we hit off the machine that's faster than these kids. Like, what are we talking? Like, how can you not hit this guy? Whatever. And I go talk to her nephew after the game. I'm like, hey, did you have fun or not? He's like, I had fun. I was like, that's all that matters. Like, that's all that matters. Like, they're 6 years old. Like, what kid is being evaluated for, like, now CJ and I are working in professional baseball. Like, what 6-year-old kid is being evaluated for professional baseball or college baseball where we worked at the time? The answer is nobody. Like, we're not going to 6-year-old baseball, so who cares? Like, who cares, man? Like, and that's where it's like, if they don't enjoy what they're doing, and again, like, I think CJ can attest to this, and I will attest to this, like, the people we played for growing up have created a love for this game that has allowed us to continue to work in it. And I'm sure, like, everybody here, like Kelly, like Eric, you, like, everybody has a guy that's like, man, like, this guy made an impact on my life to cause me to work in this profession and help kids. Like, and that's where it's like people get caught up in, again, like, wins and losses, and they get caught up in all these things versus how are these guys getting better and how are we making an impact on these kids? And I was really fortunate that I tell a story all the time. Like, my dad recognized at a young age that I loved learning about baseball. And he paid for the newspaper to get delivered to my house. And I would read the stats page and, like, read the transactions page and, like, do all these things because I was into it. And then took me to a clinic at Safeco Field. And I heard the third base coach talk about coaching and learned all these things and got a free set of, like, coaching cards and, like, all these drills that I could do at home. And it's so easy to get caught up in, like, are we winning? Are we losing? Are we, like, but the biggest thing is, like, how are we impacting kids? Like, how are we making kids love this game? Because this game is a hard game to love. Because, like, again, like, I love football. Like, I'm a football guy by trade. Like, I love football. Like, hey, man, like, watching film, developing players, like, developing a scheme for defense. Like, how do we do this? Like, my high school football coach still talks to me like, hey, like, if I sent you a film, could you look at it? It's like, yeah, I can figure out a tendency at some point. Like, that's just something I'm gifted at doing. And as a player, I was good at because I would sit in your classroom and watch film all day. If I could, I would skip class if I could and watch film. But, like, I developed a love for the game. And, like, that's where people get caught up in, like, did we win or did we lose? Like, or did we create somebody who loves this game? And this game is so hard, man. And it's so failure oriented. And it's like, how do we develop men out of this game? And whether it's CJ or me or you guys as, like, high school coaches or Kelly, like, how do we develop these guys to understand that bad things are going to happen? And how do we overcome the bad things? Like, because if we can't overcome the bad, like, we're never going to be successful. It doesn't matter if you're at Stanford or now, like, in professional baseball, like, or D2 or high school. It don't matter, man. Like, how do we develop these guys to understand that losses are going to happen, and how do I respond?
Well, I think
And it's
you
so
hit it.
crazy
You
that,
hit
like,
it there, Jeff.
again,
I'm
like,
cutting you off because I can. I'm a host here.
do it.
We need
Ken,
it. We need
man.
it. Hey, we talked about analytics on this, Eric. We need an analytic of total time talked per person on this episode. We'll be interested to see how it breaks down. Anyways, we talk a lot about you never know when the game's gonna, keep playing until someone tells you can't anymore, right? Like, play as long as you can, and none of us were fortunate enough to play at professional baseball or the big leagues, right? And so I think that's the perspective, and you just hit on it there, Jeff. Like, it just kind of rung a bell for me, is that you don't know that there's a lot of guys on your team, probably the vast majority, 90 to 95% of the team that you coach, wherever that is in baseball, is going to be the highest level that those guys reach, right? So the game is ending for the very vast majority of the guys on your team right now, right? So you have to have that perspective to allow that experience to be the most positive thing you can, whether it's 6-year-old, 12-year-old, high school, college, professional, whatever. It's going to end at some point very, very soon for a lot of guys. So trying to provide the best experience possible, teaching life lessons, and allowing guys to excel and experience joy and all the things that go into team sports, especially our sport, is the most important thing of why we do this deal, right? Why we coach is to have guys come back and get all those wedding invites that you talk about, Jeff, and reaching out and saying that I'm going to have my child or whatever that is. Like those are the things more rewarding than, John Doe hitting a double to, raise his batting average to 300 and breaking the doubles record for night games on Wednesdays for whatever, right? Like you have to understand that it's so much bigger than just the baseball side of things.
Well, let's I got one more question to wrap this thing up. And it's been pretty awesome. And it's a question for both you guys and Kelly, because you've all been there, but I want to end on a kind of a fun topic, right? So both of you guys have had the last couple of years of some pretty awesome runs in the regional playoffs. And I know a lot of people love their March Madness, but for me, I just can't wait for when regionals and supers get around, and thank God they're all streamed online now. And my wife hates it, but it's awesome watching for me and how many, your bases loaded. But what's a fun story? What's a memorable moment for you guys? Kelly too, when you were at UW, and from a regional experience you guys have had. Looks like Kelly's up first. All right.
Yep. No, I think, at the time, I think these guys were further along in their careers and obviously had bigger roles for when they were in there. I was in the mode of just kind of soaking it all in, trying to be a sponge and try to learn things from all those people I was fortunate to be able to work around. But I've been in some big games. I've been around some big games before, and it really doesn't feel any different. And I don't know why, but there's some perspective. There's some, like CJ having that kumbaya, like, oh my gosh, there's 30,000 people here. But you still looking around the dugout like, oh, these are the same dudes that were around. This guy's out there at short. This guy's pitching. Like, you don't really think of the moment too much until you go back and like reflect on what happened. So I think it's just having that perspective of, the emotions get a little bit bigger, I think, in the moments of success, of failure. You have to be really, really conscious of the highs and lows. I draw back to our GNAC tournament in 19, like just like super high and super low lows, like within that whole deal, and being close to, being able to move on to a regional was a huge thing, but you don't really think about that until after the fact of, damn, we were that close. But in the moment, like, I think it's all about managing emotions. It's not about X's and O's when you get there. Like you've prepared the entire year to get your guys to a tournament setting, whether that's, a conference tournament, a regional, a super regional. Never got the World Series. CJ flex that ring. But when you get guys there, like there's so much pressure, like that can be amongst them. Like you have to be able to just erase everything. You're not correcting anything. You're not on them. Like it's all about trying to find good feelings with those guys the entire time. And Jason's been there too. Oh, you're shaking your head. Shake your head, guy. You're number 2. Go ahead.
I was saying that you canceled out for a second, but that's fine.
Shake your head,
Shake your head guy here. I think, like this last year, like we made the regional final against South Carolina, and there was definitely a moment where, like, again, I give complete credit to Joey Holcomb, because Joey Holcomb has been in the college, he's been to Omaha with North Carolina State, then he came here to Campbell, now he's South Carolina. I was riled up about like some stuff in the dugout. It's probably the second inning. Like I'm getting riled up about something, and he just grabs me, and he's like, "Hey, like, go downstairs, get a drink of water. It's just another day. It's just another day." And I was like, "What are you talking about?" He's like, "Just go get a drink of water. come back. It's just another day. And there was like 8,000 people at the regional final at South Carolina. It's a home game. It's a final game. And so like, I go down, get a drink of water, come back, like go out to first base. And like I had some perspective of like, I'm at first base and I was like, man, like a year ago, I was coaching Biola and I was the third base coach, and there was maybe 15 people in the stands for a game. Like maybe 15 for 11 o'clock on Saturday afternoon. And the umpire, like we had a Ben Main call, and the umpire first like looks at me, he's like, "You good? Like you want to challenge that?" And I was like, "No, like you got the call right. Like, no, man, like I'm good. Like I just realized like I was coaching in front of 15 people a year ago today." He looks at me and he's like, "Man, you're out of place, aren't you?" I'm like, "Yeah, I am a little bit." Like I was the head coach then too. I was on the other side of the field. I wasn't over here. And went back to the dugout, like got a drink of water, and I was like, come back to where I usually was sitting in the dugout when we're on defense. And I was like, I looked at Joey, and I was like, man, like, thank you. Like I needed that. Like I really did. And like just taking the perspective of like, man, like what an opportunity for me to be a Division II guy and coach in the College World Series championship game in front of like 500 people, 700 people, and now be in a college regional in front of 8,000 people singing, you know, Sandstorm in the seventh inning and booing me and knowing my name and telling me I'm the worst first base coach in America and all these things. And like, man, like I wouldn't, like, you're a volunteer assistant coach. I wouldn't pay you either. Like, best line of all time.
Whoa.
Damn.
Yeah, best line of all time.
Good.
And I was like, it took every ounce of me not to turn around and be like, that's a really good line. Like, I just wore it. And, like, went back to the dugout and, like, I looked at Joey and I was like, man, like, this is awesome. Like, this is so cool, man. He's like, this is what you signed up for. And, you know, like, didn't get to 30,000 people like CJ did in the World Series, but, like, that was probably the coolest moment. Like, outside of us hitting the game-time grand slam, home run in, like, seventh inning, like, Bryce Arnold hit it, and we do our home run celebration. We do rock, paper, scissors. Like, like, outside of that was the coolest moment of being in a regional in Division I baseball. Not even close. So, Steve, tell us about the World Series. Tell us about
it. So I'll give you two. I'll give you one that's not in favor of Stanford, and then I'll give you like the best memory I'll have probably for the rest of my career. But the SEC has this thing where they're like, it just means more, right? Like SEC, it just means more. And I will forever. So we had beat Arkansas my first year, early in the year, to win the Round Rock Classic down in Texas. I have a belt buckle and a trophy somewhere, storage. But we beat them earlier in the year, and we draw them for first game in the World Series. And I step out into the dugout, and they're doing these introductions on like the big screen, and there's all these people in Omaha, and they find like a Stanford fan, and they're like, on the big screen, they're like, hey, give us something for the Stanford fans. And this guy goes, let's go Stanford. And you hear like 1,500 people like, yeah. And we're like, oh. And they find a Arkansas fan, which is like not hard to do. And they're like, hey, call out the pigs. And they do this like, oh, pigs, suey.
Ooh, pigs, suey.
Yeah. And so at that moment, you realize that the stadium is 28,500 people there to see Arkansas and 1,500 there to see Stanford play. And I remember getting like goosebumps. And even our pitching coach's wife, Coach Eager, his wife said that it's so catchy that even his little boys, he's got 3 adorable little boys. One of them was like, oh, and she's like, no, put your hands down, But it's at that moment where you're like, man, like we've been good all year, and it really does just mean a little bit more out there. It was unbelievable. But my favorite story, it goes back to a regional my first year, Texas State and us, and Texas State had beat us earlier in the regional. We're really good at coming out from the bottom of our own regionals. We had scrapped and clawed, and Texas State beats us early in this regional. And I'm watching them play. I'm like, this is the best team that we've seen all year by far. Lineup was unbelievable. They have this Gonzalez kid who, I mean, just every ball he hits, you're like, this is David Ortiz. I've never seen him in Gonzalez in the room at the same time. So I'm convinced, like, he's unbelievable. He was taking ball 4 as the ball was released from the hand. Like, he knows. Like, the kid was just a good player. And so we scratch and claw, and we get to this last game, and we are like in that mode where every single pitcher, regardless of how much they've thrown that entire weekend, is like, I'm available. And we're down in the going into the 9th inning. And I'll never forget in the top of the 9th when they went ahead and they got to Braden Montgomery. They kid hits a piss rocket, 2-run score. We pull Braden and put Brant Panther in, and and their players are hugging each other in the dugout. And I'm standing next to Vinny Martinez, who ended up playing at Notre Dame for his grad year. And Vinny looks at me and he goes, that's the end of my college career right there. And I was like, hey, if it is, it's been a hell of a run, huh? And I'm always like dry humor, right? Like, just whatever, just try it. We'll get the the dark stuff out of the room. We'll keep it light here. And so I try and crack a joke, and Brant comes in, gets the next out, and we go into that just down 2. And Drew comes up, hits a home run, his at bat, Drew Bowser hits a rocket, and then Tommy Troy hits this home run, and all of a sudden we are like, oh my God, we're gonna win this thing. And the kid that beat us the first game, who's electric, Levi Wells, the guys had seen him at Texas Tech 2 years earlier to go to Omaha. He comes in, he had been trash talking us, all this stuff. It's great. Like, it's college baseball at its purest, right? And when Eddie Park walks to lead off that inning, and I'm telling you, you'll never see a player more fired up about a walk in your entire life than Eddie Park. The whole Sunken Diamond's going nuts. He's like flexing at the dugout. Brock Jones gets on, and then we've got this freshman Trevor Haskins that we put in as a defensive replacement. And he had to play, and the kid is just ice in his veins, gets the biggest knock maybe in Stanford history to send us on to a super regional and beat Texas State. That moment was like, you are just out of body. You go numb. It's like everyone's hugging everyone. It's impossible to describe the amount of emotion. And that was just to get us to the series that then gets us to the World Series. I don't even remember what happened against UConn. I know we lost a game and then we won 2, but I'll always remember Texas State. Trevor just having that. Oh yeah, you guys are there.
Yeah, me and Kelly were there. Like,
our bad.
Me and Kelly were there. We're trying to pick. Me and Kelly were out there like coach mode, like, let's pick the pitcher.
Let's get a better angle. Come up top.
Like a comedian that ties like the early joke into the end joke. That does go into like, Trevor was just ready. He was ready. He was 18 years old, had no business playing in a decisive game when the rest of, like, a majority of that roster that played that entire year had been to Omaha the year before. He had no business being that calm. Like, he took every pitch and fouled every pitch off like he had done it for 200 at bats that season, and he had under 20. And the preparation that he put in every single day was the reason that he was able to hit a single off of an amazing pitcher and send us to the next level. And that is the epitome of what makes good players great right there. It was awesome. Always remember.
Eric, real quick. CJ Baker is like, again, like, I have been really fortunate because I'm one of the 2 guys on this podcast who's been a head coach in college baseball. And like, I've been really fortunate because CJ was able to work with me, and he is the best hitting guy around. Like again, like you ask people who have played Stanford in those years that CJ was there, and like, man, there was just something different. We can't figure it out. And you ask them, like, there are guys that I'll tell off podcasts, like, hey, like, man, we played Stanford without CJ and with CJ. There's something different, man. And I am his ultimate hype guy. And I will go to my grave that, like, you and I have joked about it, CJ, like, there is a D3 out there somewhere that someday we will take over and just absolutely hijack the program. And people will be like, what is going on with this Division III program? And it's like, CJ and Callie, you're back together. Like, I don't know what the deal is. It's like they're out here running the program. And again, I have been so fortunate to have one of my best friends and a guy who talked trash to me before I hired him about the job I took. The fact that I had worked 14 days before I called him to come work with me. And be like, you survived this long? And I was like, yeah, man. Like, I'm still here. They haven't fired me yet. He's like, well, that's a testament to them being knuckleheads. Like, what? Shout out our AD, Bethany Miller. But, again, like, CJ is, like, the stories he talks about with the cage time with Carter Graham and, like, time with other guys, like, man, like, there are times that our first year we rolled. We had a great time my first year, and a lot of that credit goes to CJ, and it does not get to him because it gets to me, which is not right. But we're on a podcast at the same time. It's never happened before, so I have to give credit where credit is due. My roommate, CJ Baker, best sitting guy in America.
Dang right.
And you can close it out. So it's fine.
That's the perfect way to end this thing, man. This has been a fun couple hours of. It doesn't even seem like it's been for 2 hours. It was a lot of fun. Thank you guys for taking some time, staying up late in the East Coast, and getting some Fungo Banner episode in for us. We really appreciate that.
It's been a blast, absolute blast.
Yeah, I'm not making 430 weights. I'll tell you that right now. So,
but Jeff, guess what day it is where you are?
It's hump day.
Hump day.
I guess I'll have to go to the pro session at 8:30. Darn. Shucks.
Oh gosh.
Hey, Eric, Jason. Thanks for having us on. Kelly, yeah, you know what you're getting into with us, so it's fine. So it's like
another day.
It was awesome. Audio gold. That's what that was. So
no, stop it. Oh, stop it.
Stop it. All right. Jason and Kelly and I'll be right back to wrap this thing up. Hold on.
Now entering from the bullpen.
Well, we're back to wrap this thing up, guys. What'd you think?
It's good. No, yeah. Go ahead, Cal.
There's a lot. Two great people, two Northwest guys moving on to the next thing, and plenty of impact there. I don't think there's enough time for us to even talk about everything that we just went through. But you can tell the passion for these guys, and they've grinded their way through it. And it's great for us to be a part of their next journey, their next step, and for them to come on here and share about it. Because, there's not a lot of credit given to the minor league coach, and, their name's listed somewhere on a roster, but, they're not getting the glitz and glamour for what they're doing. So awesome to have them on. We're fired up about following their careers and hopefully they can climb the ladder there. And definitely a spot for them in baseball wherever they end up going. So excited to have them on and have them be a part of our follow-up episodes. Awesome night.
Yeah, it was actually first duo that we've had, right? I mean, so it was a great combination of a partnership there going on, and seeing two great Pacific Northwest coaches moving on in their careers, and just the passion, and like you said, Kelly, the passion and the impact that they're making in the game. And the real reason, it's not for the money that we do this, right? I mean, I know, especially on the high school side, I mean, Eric and I don't get as much. I know, Kelly, I don't know if you probably don't get as much as what you put into it, man. I mean, it's hard work, and just being a head coach in general and running a program and building a foundation. It's like, you're trying to do it right. And sometimes the process takes a little bit of time, but if you're patient with that process, you're going to get there. And, before you know it, you're GNAC league champs, and you got your own ring, and you're building that for the future. So it was encouraging, and just great to hear the things that they had to talk about, the goal setting and the impact of the player to coach, and just the process. And I think of a lot of new coaches out there, just listen intently. We listen to the words that we want to listen to apply, but if you listen intently with the words that are being spoken by these guys tonight, will definitely change you.
Yeah, that was good. That was fun. I guess as we planned this one, and then all the way through it reflected back on honestly where we started and where this thing's gone and where people have gone from 2020 to now. And it's going to be a lot of fun watching those two and their progress through professional baseball. And it's pretty cool world we're living in, the Pacific Northwest, and the people that we have. And it's going to be awesome. Fired up for having another episode as we get closer to the season. Can't wait to bring you more. Go check out our sponsors, Max BP. Go check out our other sponsor, Safeguard out of the Tri-Cities, and Devo Bats. Go to devobats.com. There will be more to come with all of that. So thank you again for another great episode. Please share, please rate and review, and that helps us a ton. So take care of one another.